Well, hello there. This is my new window. Obviously, you can see it's a screen behind me. However, this shot is actually on the island I live. So if you ever visit, or if you're here in the next, 10 days or so, this is what it's going to look like from this walk. This is what they call EB's walk. And Coopville, if you're standing at the top of this hill looking this way, Coopville would be that way to the east. And you're looking west here. The mountains are in the west. That's over. Port Townsend would be just a little bit back that way. Oh, you can see my bookshelves in the background there. Fascinating. Anyway, that's how that works. The I just wanted to share that this is some of the natural beauty that exists here. The picture does not do justice to how this feels when you're standing here, because I can stand and look and it's expansive. It looks this way all the way to the south. You're looking right now, the view behind me is looking north towards Canada in the back, because the Strait of Juan de Fuca takes a left turn, goes out to the Pacific Ocean. If you reverse that, you end up down in Seattle. Anyway, that is not the title of this, is this? This is the process of trauma and completion of tremoring. And I'm reading in Plutchik's book called The Emotions. And in the beginning, he's talking about the theory of emotion. What is a theory of emotions? Theory as integrator, stimulator, and incorporator. So theory as an integrator. Not only should a theory of emotion answer in some sense the various questions that have been posed, but it should act to integrate and explain the many things we already accept as fact. Okay, pretty well. Theory as stimulator of research. A third and related function, I skipped predictor, is a stimulator of research. Any adequate theory will indicate gaps in our knowledge that require filling and providing a spur to certain kinds of studies. Okay. When it comes to healing trauma, the somatic experience about it is relatively new. And granted, things started back in the 50s with, I'm going to say, bioenergetics and Alexander Lowen, and have crawled ever since. It's easy for me, if you're in this field, we tend to think this is the world, where in reality, most people have no clue what this is. Most people who teach in this field have no clue what this stuff is. And in my particular program of trauma healing, we have to deal with emotions. And we do that from the focus of creating emotional literacy. That's where the focus is. The focus isn't on the powerful emotions that go with the traumatic experiences. And I use that phrase cautiously because experiences are not traumas. Stress is what creates trauma. That's why it's PTSD. And any variation, shape, form, it is PTTS, traumatizing stress, traumatic stress. The stress is the noun. That's the boogeyman. Traumatizing stress is that stuff that stays in the body. And I'm going to do another video on this with some slides that will show how this is effectively. So it's a little bit more visual. But one of the things that goes along with that is emotions. All right. And the process of regulating and pendulation and titration, I'm just going to say regulation for now, helps to prevent us from getting jazzballed emotionally. And as I've been reading this, I've had some thoughts about that. So anyway, theory as stimulator of research and theory as incorporator. A fourth function of theory, sometimes overlooked, is to show relationships between apparently diverse areas. So it begins to create questions. Okay. So we use constructs and in addition to those functions already mentioned, theories also use certain kinds of procedures or methods of approach. These might be described as constructs, analysis and synthesis, and analogy. Now, he says something here that's quite interesting. There's an, there is in most theories an attempt to conceive of a complex phenomena as the result of the interaction of a variety of simple causes or units. In chemistry, the millions of naturally occurring substances are shown to result from the mixture of a relatively few kinds of elements, and these in turn result from the interaction of even smaller number of units of matter. This process of reducing a compound or a mixture to its elements is called analysis. So I am going to present you with a little bit of theory of analysis, especially when it comes to emotion and how they work in trauma. And part of what it means, or my analysis at this point of how tremoring deals with this and helps us heal. All right. So Candace Pert, and see, here's where I'm tying together these what can seemingly be diverse areas. Candace Pert, molecules of emotion. She was one of the first, I believe, who actually tied down various neurotransmitters to emotions. So we can say probably with accuracy that at least it's some form of a electrochemical mixture. Let's call it a recipe. And I would gather to say that each emotion then is different. It could include hormones, it could include, any number of things. And I haven't got there. I have another book here, How Emotions Are Made, uh, by Lisa F. Barrett. And I want to break into this one and see about how this works in the human organism, because it'll only grant us understanding. And at this point in time, in the realm of the modality called TRE, the founder would say that we don't have any idea what tremoring is actually working on while we're tremoring. Okay, I'll grant you that. Now, when it comes to dealing with emotions, what I teach my clients is to regulate around emotional intensity. Because as we're getting close, a talk therapist is going to say you need to go back into your trauma to heal it. And that is incorrect. If you're back in your trauma, you're getting re traumatized. So, a bit of a quagmire there. Whereas with tremoring, you can have the healing without talking about it, without thinking about it, and frankly, without even having to remember it. I am going to do something here because that is annoying. I don't know if you saw it or not, but it was annoying to me. Anyway, this is my real world. I do like that picture though. But the so part of this stress response, every part of you goes into the stress response, and I can't call that up quite now because I haven't created it yet. But the article, the PDF I created that shows a picture of all of the things that occur when we go into the fight flight response. And part of that will depend on, if we just go into fight flight, we could go into freeze, depending on how how terrifying or helpless we feel at that given instant, that instance, let's say. If it escalates quickly, there's a good chance we'll go right into freeze. Otherwise, we stay in fight flight. And it's interesting in the picture. There's a little bit of fear, but there's also this fight, this rage, and but it has a list of all the nerves and all kinds of things that occur when we go into fight flight, and it happens in an instant. And a lot of things happen to us in terms of emotions, so forth and so on. Now, I'm going to go into my speculation, my theory, which I have yet to prove, but I'm working on that. So, if our emotions are these constructs of hormones and who knows what else, but some kind of electrical charge to go along with that, those are all present when we go into the fight flight. They somewhat are created then and there, just like they are all day long with us anyway. And I think what ends up happening is when we attach storyline to that, which history will do anyway, let's say my dad once punched me square in the face. Well, the memory of that, the reality of that, the fact of that is going to be imprinted there because I'll have that feeling and the emotion that goes around that. That is also stored in my body, per Peter Levine in his book, In an Unspoken Voice. And Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Remembers the Score, and Babette Rothschild, The Body Remembers. The body does remember all of this stuff. So if we have this, now here's the problem. We go into the stress cycle and we don't complete it. So this record is stored not only in the body, but it's stored in the intrinsic memory. Doesn't belong there. Intrinsic memory is this is the way things are versus this is what happened. Does that make sense? The two memories. Explicit is this is what happened on my 16th birthday. This is what happened when I went camping, so forth and so on. Intrinsic memory is that I can hop on a bike after X number of years and still know how to ride. That's intrinsic. So if I get biffed in the face by my dad, and that becomes part of intrinsic memory, that means that there's this chemical imprint, as it were. It's like when we take a picture with our phone, what ends up happening? It puts a date stamp on it. Well, I think what happens is there's a chemical stamp that says this is not only this is the way things are, but this is now stuck in my body. When we get into fight flight, what happens when that becomes chronic? Imagine that. Imagine a micro version of this. That's the way we live. That's traumatizing stress. That's why they say that PTSD can start somewhere down the road, because it takes time to establish that as a chronic pattern. But that means that there's all kinds of stuff going on that should not be going on. We are not evolved to have this as a chronic experience. So my theory here is that as we tremor, as this release is happening, this completion and discharge out of our bodies, we need to give this time. So with my clients, we start once a week. That's it. It's short because the body is now starting to move back to equilibrium. And we could have been in a trench, down into the valley, up to the mountaintop several times over before we get back to equilibrium, through the hurricane, through the tornado, through the earthquake, stung by bees, chased by bears. Yeah, I won't go there. Chased, bit by sharks, chased by octopus. Let's just make this brutal. That's what it's like to get back to this equilibrium, which is why trauma cannot be healed in 2 sessions or 2 hours. It would be so painful in our body to just think about this from a myofascial perspective, and we'll add the skeleton. Okay, if I'm constricted like this, my bones are now are being pulled by the constriction in my muscles. So if I'm doing this and they're pulling up and stuff like, what happens to my posture? Yeah, especially after 56 years. There could be all kinds of things with my upper back, my lower back, my hips. All of all of those things are now pulling on my bones, and it will deform how the bone is shaped and where it's supposed to be relative to my structure. Release all that in an instant or an hour? That's not going to happen. That is not going to happen, which is why with my program, I have you tremor, you short time, and I want you to have that week for your body to whoa, okay, we started to move back to equilibrium that we haven't had before. Cool. Now it has to process that. So we will titrate that experience over time until your body has done enough of this where your body can now process stuff a little bit faster. Because if we have all of these chemical stamps inside of our muscular myofascial system and our intrinsic memory, which now is going to get rewired because now the neurotransmitters and all the rest of the stuff are finding the completion and discharge that they've been looking for forever and ever and ever and ever. Amen. It's kind of like having that picture somewhere halfway in between memory and reality, the experience. It's like getting that little wheel that just keeps going around, never quite does its job. Okay. Well, now we've given it this connection. We've suddenly we've got a new network, and boom, it starts to move. If we give it too much, it's going to get flooded. It's going to forget things. It's not going to be pleasant. That's my theory. I still can't say what it's working on. There's some movement from some of my colleagues in that area. However, at this point in time, I think it's because of this chemical makeup of our emotions, which is why we want to give this time, because now our body needs to take those time stamps and those chemical stamps, which may still be together, which might still be locked into the fascia that innervates every cell of my muscles. And then it gets to walk up to it and say, okay, here's your pink slip. You're done. Don't need you anymore. Goodbye. And it goes, whoo-hoo. It gets to dissolve. All those chemicals can go back and do the things that they need to do. I think that's the analysis that happens in our bodies when we tremor. Stay tuned, because I think I'm going to learn more about that as I read this, which is interesting. This is a newer book. 2017, not this one. In fact, mine came from the UCLA bookstore. I'd like to find a date on this. Yeah. Unfortunately, there isn't one. So in between these years, 1991. So there are some interesting things that have happened in these intervening years. So what I'm looking to do now, does that mean I'm going to be sharing or talking about any of this with people as we work through the program? Probably not. I just think it's kind of exciting. And for me, there's a fulfilling aspect to understanding what my body is doing. So for me to be able to say we're going to take this week. I don't want you to tremor at all. I can then say your body needs to be able to break down some of these emotions and move some of this chemical stuff around in your body. It needs to resolve this because part of what happens when we get traumatized is it creates a new normal, and that a lot of that's right here, because the way we're hardwired, A, we're hardwired to be social, and B, we are hardwired so that stress is acute, not chronic. When we make it chronic, we now create a brand new set of neural networks around here. And along with all of that traumatizing stress, what does it do to us? It ruptures relationships big time. It interferes with friendships, it interferes with intimate relationships, and it interferes with work relationships. Now I have these networks in my head that are telling me certain things about people, about relationships, so on and so forth, which are no longer useful if I'm going to heal. So the brain can actually take those apart, and it does. Another reason. So, I mean, there's a certain amount of space in here, right? Even though it's got a lot of cells in here, it's a limited amount of space. And so if there's old stuff going on, your brain takes it apart. Says, now these cells aren't being used anymore. We're going to take those and put these somewhere else where they will be used. And that is now the healing, the new life, the life signs emerging, the reconnection with the body, the ability to even identify your emotions. I'll say my emotions because I couldn't. My list was really short. Now I get to learn how to navigate my emotions. And now that I feel safe and relaxed and blood is flowing back to my brain, I can start using these emotions to also make better decisions. And since this blood is flowing back into my brain, there's more of my prefrontal cortex online, even though this is still a small stage. So now we get to think about clear thinking, critical thinking. And those are the things that we get to bring into relationships. Because without a foundation in those things, we don't have successful relationships. And it just goes from there. Anyway, my theory of emotional analysis, some gibberish like that. Anyway, up next will be the video on, and I'll be popping up some slides here, one of which you may have seen here, but it will be the slides about the stress response. What happens when you go into it, and then what will happen when you deactivate. Anyway, take care. Have yourself a great Monday evening. Night.